Morning, Commissioner Reitman.
Good morning.
And Abby, I assume you are the Planning and Innovation host?
Yes, that is me.
Okay. Let's see if I can shift my camera. If I'm going to be able to. Shoot. Oh, maybe. Do it like I do it.
Hi, Chair McDonald. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can.
Great.
I'm going to put the volume up a little higher. Yeah.
Thanks, Abby, for getting us started.
Absolutely.
Oops, where'd I go? Okay.
I'm going to do a slide test just to make sure y'all can see my computer
Great.
here.
Jenny, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Can you hear us all right?
We can. Jenny, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Kester.
Kester. There we go. Thank you. Oops. Commissioner Potowski, welcome.
And just checking if you can see the slides.
Yes,
Great.
Yes. Look great. I'll be right back. Abby, can you check with Mary Morelands to see if she's representing Northwest Natural today? And then if so, elevate her.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can unmute her here. Mary, are you representing Northwest Natural today? And if so, I can go ahead and make you a panelist.
Maybe she's away from her desk.
Oh, looks like she put it in the chat. Perfect. I'll go ahead and promote her.
Great. Give folks a few more minutes to sign on. Dr. Rasmussen, are you there with Jenny?
Yes, I am.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. Sorry, we had a struggle finding the mute button.
Appreciate that.
Chair McDonald, it also looks like we have a couple phone callers. I'm wondering if maybe before we get started, folks can identify in case we need to promote anyone.
That sounds right to me, but Zach, thank you.
Okay. It looks like there's a one phone caller with a 503 area code. If you could just let us know if you're a panelist, that'd be great.
Good morning. This is Julie Cifuentes from Oregon Health Authority.
Great, awesome. And I think, Julie, you're sitting in for Oregon Health Authority's seat on the commission here. So we'll make sure to watch your number in case you have questions or want to provide input.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And I apologize, I missed your last name.
Cifuentes. Do you want me to spell it?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, it's S and Sam, I, F, and Frank, UENTES.
Great, Cervantes. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. And it looks like we have two other callers. So there's a caller with a 971 area code. If you wanted to let us know if you're representing an agency or a commission seat.
Hey, Zach, it's Jessica Rikers from the Oregon Department of Energy.
That's awesome. Hey, Jessica. Thanks for joining. All right. And then the last one is a 541 area code.
Hey, Zach, can you hear me, Zach? This is Rep Levy. And it's
Oh, hey, Rep Levy.
541-515-5557 is mine.
Okay, awesome. We've got you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Okay. Well, thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. I'd like to open the October 9th meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. And I'd like to call it to order. Today we observe Indigenous Peoples Day, and I am joining the meeting today from Portland, and Portland rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Bands of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their home along the Columbia and Willamette River. I hope that commissioners and members of the public joining us were able to take some time earlier today to reflect on and honor the contributions Native Americans have made and their resilience in the face of quite a bit of adversity over generations. So I just wanted to acknowledge that today and encourage people to take time to reflect and honor Indigenous people. Thank you. As I said in August, I really appreciate the new resources and responsibilities the legislature assigned the commission and ODO on our behalf. And we're excited to start to get that work going and to step up to those responsibilities. Today, next slide, please. Today, we're going to, oh, sorry, I wanted to go, thank you. Today, we're going to hear from staff who will provide an update on kind of the status of our commission membership, the status of work being done to advance the new areas of responsibility we are taking on as part of House Bill 3409, as well as an overview of comments that we received on the draft work plan and some early staff responses to those comments. In addition, we'll be hearing from colleagues from the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute, the Oregon Coordinating Council on Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia, and the Public Utility Commission. So we appreciate, and we have some special guests here with us today to make these some of these presentations. After a few more introductory remarks, we'll take roll call, and then after roll call, I'll invite commission members to provide additional updates if there are any for the good of the order. Regarding public comment, we will have time for public comment in today's meeting, estimated to occur around 2:30. Could be a little sooner or a little later. Abby and Zach, will you remind people how they can let us know what that they want to testify and how they go about doing that?
Absolutely. There's a couple of options. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, down at the bottom of your screens, there should be like a little smiley face and then a hand next to it. If you click on that hand, it'll raise your hand, and then that'll notify us that you're wanting to make a comment. There's also a little chat feature. It's like a little speech bubble, and you can type it into the chat if you're more comfortable doing that as well.
Thank you. I'm just taking stock on who may have joined us since the opening remarks, and then I'll do roll call. So in terms of voting members, I'll start with the voting members and then go to the non-voting members. Commissioner Reitman.
Here.
Commissioner Ford.
Here.
Commissioner Sheeran.
Present.
Mary Morelands, representing Commissioner Anderson. We'll come back. And then on the non-voting members, Commissioner Potowski.
Here.
Director Benner.
Here.
Director Bateman.
I'm here.
Julie Cifuentes, representing the Oregon Health Authority. Colin McConaughey representing DEQ. Colin McConaughey.
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to unmute myself. Are you able to hear
Thank
me?
you.
Yeah.
Suzanne Carlson representing the Department of Transportation. Garrett Martin representing the PUC.
I'm here.
Excellent, thank you. And Judith Callens representing Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? I don't think we heard Mary Moreland, but we talked to her earlier, so. Oh, there she is. We will acknowledge you are here. Okay. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn things over. So I open things up if anybody has any comments that you'd like to make. Commissioner updates. Director Benner.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to provide an update. I know that the ODO team will be talking a lot about the work we will be undertaking as part of the Global Warming Commission Modernization Bill and Natural and Working Lands. I just wanted to flag a couple more things that we're working on that might be of interest to folks on this call. We're about to launch the development of an energy security plan as required by the legislature in 2022, as well as by some of our federal funding. And we're working closely with the Oregon PUC on that. I think there will be an official launch on Monday, next Monday. We are also going to be launching next month, I believe, a kickoff of our energy strategy. So another bill that passed in the 2023 session was a bill to require the Oregon Department of Energy to put together an energy strategy to look at how we're going to meet our long-term goals and how to sort of think about and weigh the trade-offs between various pathways. So we will be likely coming back to this group when we get that underway to talk about your thoughts on the energy strategy. We're also going to be putting together a building performance standards program. And then if you're curious about federal funding, lots of it coming in, lots of programs getting launched slowly but surely. And I can put in a link to our website, our federal funding page. We try to keep that updated with information on both what are the federal funds available for energy and climate for Oregonians, and then also what is the Oregon Department of Energy doing to bring funding to our agency and the state for energy and climate solutions. Happy to answer any questions on chat if you'd like. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Benner. I assume both of these projects that you mentioned, the energy security planning and the strategy, are those running along the same timelines? And I assume they'll be kind of intersecting work, or they will inform each other. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They will be informing each other. The timelines are slightly different related to the deadlines in bills and in federal funding, but yes, they will be informing each other.
That's great. Those, I think, will be incredibly helpful in making sure that we stay on track and make really good decisions as we move forward on how to best meet our energy needs. So thank you for letting us know about that. Any other questions for Director Benner? Any other updates that people want to share? Commission members?
Yes, this is Commissioner Reitman. I was just wanting to respond to the commentary about how possibly we're not able to meet our goals. And I just want to speak for the natural and working land sector. It's just, there's a lot of metrics that really we haven't addressed. We haven't measured what we're doing, but I just know from observation that we've made a lot of progress that is not accounted for. I think that we need to remember that there's a lot of change happening that's not been measured, and so don't give up hope.
Absolutely. No, I'm very hopeful on both fronts, just recognizing that that it's great to have these additional efforts to help us make the best decisions we can make. So agree with you. Any other updates or questions, comments?
Yes, this is Brenda Bateman, Director at DLCD. I just wanted to follow on those comments about the natural and working lands. To note that I think that group last met in July. We were very excited to get the estuaries and land components inserted into that conversation, and was wondering if you had any updates in terms of next steps or next meeting date for that group.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. We have scheduled a meeting of agency staff to come together on the 14th of October. So meeting soon, and then I believe there'll be some discussion at the Natural Resource Cabinet as well this month.
Great, thank you. Could you forward that invitation to me? I don't think my staff has seen that for the 14th.
I think it just was sent out on Friday.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other updates, questions, or comments? Okay, well, I will go ahead and turn things over to Zach. Take it away, Zach.
Thanks, Chair McDonald. Hey, everyone. Good to see you. We have a number of things on the agenda, as Chair McDonald was saying, and wanted to kick off today's conversation with open commission seats, as it takes some time to get folks appointed. And we have openings both because of the new legislation coming out of last session, as well as existing open seats due to some members moving on over the course of this year. So to help provide context for those openings, wanted to remind folks about the current Global Warming Commission membership structure first. So the commission is made up of 25 members, 11 voting members and 14 non-voting members. The 11 voting members include 6 specific seats representing agriculture, forestry, energy, transportation, manufacturing, and environmental interests. And then there are 5 at-large members. The 14 non-voting members include 4 legislators, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat from each chamber, appointed by the Speaker of the House and Senate President, respectively. And then there are 7 specified state agency directors, and those include the Oregon Department of Energy, Oregon Department of Transportation, the Public Utility Commission, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Oregon Department of Forestry, and the Oregon Water Resources Department. And then there are 3 others from agencies or academia that are at-large seats, and they're currently held by the Department of Land Conservation and Development, the Oregon Health Authority, and Portland State University. So House Bill 3409, coming out of last session, expands the commission membership from 25 members to 35 members. The bill adds voting members as well as non-voting member seats. And the expansion takes effect January 1, 2024. But again, important to start the conversation now so folks have some time to apply and can be appointed as early as possible to hit the ground running come early January, and so that we can help get those folks onboarded and integrated into the commission's work. So I'm going to share next some of the open seats on the voting member side, and then we'll talk about the non-voting member side. So first, on the voting member side, House Bill 3409 adds 3 new voting members. Members with experience in environmental justice, a youth representative, and a member with experience in the fishing industry. when the legislature added these, they also took one at-large member away to keep membership at an odd number to avoid tie votes. This is important, I'll explain in a second, as we also have some openings for some existing open seats due to some members moving on over the course of this year. The manufacturing seat is open, and there is one at-large member seat open as well. So we actually had 2 at-large members move on, Commissioner Magnera and Commissioner Ross. But as I mentioned, when the legislature added the 3 new positions that I just talked about, they also took one at-large member away to keep membership at an odd number to avoid tie votes. So voting members are appointed by the governor, and there's some general direction in the underlying statute about member appointments, which we've included here. And we also include a link to how to apply for the open seats. And while applications are taken on a rolling basis, we encourage folks who are interested in the new and existing open seats to apply by October 30th. This will help to ensure we get folks appointed as soon as possible to fill these positions starting early January. On the non-voting member side, House Bill 3409 adds 8 new state agencies. You can see the list on the left-hand column, and 2 of these agencies, the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the Oregon Health Authority, are currently on the commission, but as at-large non-voting members. So since these 2 agencies will have specified seats starting January 1, the 2 at-large seats that they are now filling will be open. And these 2 seats need to be filled by a state agency or an academic institution. And Chair McDonald works on identifying these appointments. So there's exciting times here for new and more voices to join the commission, and wanted to make sure the commission and the public were aware. And also, this is part of our draft work plan to get folks appointed and onboarded. And we'll probably consider an in-person meeting early next year for when all the new folks are on board, so everyone can have the chance to meet each other. So that's it for now. I'm happy to answer any questions about the open seats or anything else that the commission might have questions about.
Zach, I just wanted, I think it's fair to say the application portal can be a little complex to navigate or complicated to navigate. So if people run into challenges in doing that, feel free to reach out to Zach or I, and we can see how we can help you. Any comments or questions from commission members? Thank you, Zach.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get a extra minute early here and dive into a draft work plan update. And we wanted to give you an update on the draft work plan that we put out and discussed back in August. There's been a lot of continued conversations and public comment informing how we move forward. And we did not publish an updated work plan as we're still working through things, and there's a lot of variables still to be figured out. But for now, what we plan to do is give you an update at each meeting to help inform you and the public about key status updates, some of the thinking on staff side, just to continue to keep the conversation open as we go. And so a quick outline for this meeting's update. Just wanted to reiterate some of the caveats that we talked about at the last meeting when we released the draft work plan, as many of those caveats are still in play. Wanted to provide some key status updates, and then provide a summary and discussion of public comments received, with also a brief initial, and that's underscored, initial staff response in green. Again, there's a lot of variables and considerations still to work through, but again, wanted to get our latest thinking on some of these things out to continue the conversation. So towards that end, wanted to reiterate the caveats we mentioned at the last meeting in introducing the draft work plan. We released it as a draft, and the idea was to get commission and public comment to help further inform and refine, which we did, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then there are a number of key resource considerations and variables that would impact the details and timing of the work plan. As we had discussed at the last meeting, those include staffing for the work. Existing staff capacity is limited, and new hires will be really important to move the work forward. And when we can get those new hires on board is key. As we talked about also and earlier in this meeting, the commission membership is expanding, so we'll need time to onboard those folks, and for those folks to help shape the work ahead. So we'll also discuss how the commission would like to manage its workload moving forward. We talked a little bit about that at the last meeting. There's some suggestion of subcommittees, the likely need to meet monthly moving forward for the commission. And so all of that impacts what and how we do the work ahead. Another consideration was agency resources. And in many cases, we were directed to be coordinating with agencies on this work, and also want to be doing that and have done that in the past. But many agencies involved in the work ahead did not get specific resources. So also need to scale and time the work around these considerations. And that all factors again into the work plan. And finally, a lot of the work will include use of consultants, and the availability of consultants and the associated contracting with those consultants can take time and also impact how we move forward on items. So a lot of considerations and variables to help inform the work plan further. And again, still working through those, and just wanted to remind the commission and the public of all of those considerations. And some of these are driving the key status updates that I'll be sharing on the next slide here. So these are a few key updates. Biggest one being that we're working on the position descriptions to try and get the new hires on board. As part of that, there was an internal realignment within division in the agency to create a new climate section at the agency, which will house these positions. And then the OCAC General Operations and Policy Analyst position will be able to be made a team lead for the new section. And we're planning to hire for that position first, which will then allow the team to be able to move forward with all of the work and plan and get the rest of the new staff on board. And then we're also reevaluating the RFP related timelines. There's the timelines that are currently in the draft work plan may be too optimistic based on the current contracting timelines and demands at the agency, and also staffing. So again, we'll need to be reassessing how we move forward on some of the timing with many of these work streams that we have ahead. And then on the national, there's a lot of key updates related to national and working lands work. We've, as Chair McDonald mentioned earlier, we've started engaging relevant agencies to help inform next steps on a national and working lands work. The final report on the grant-funded national and working lands work that the Commission, with the help of the Institute for Natural Resources, has done over the last year or two is now, we've received it, and it will be published by INR, the Institute for Natural Resources, and then we'll also put it on our website under the meeting materials for the next meeting, which is still to be scheduled. And then there will be opportunities for public comment on the report. the chair has also convened a commission subcommittee to review the report and identify key decision points. And as I mentioned, the plan is to discuss the report as a full commission at the next Global Warming Commission meeting, which will likely be in November. And then given some of the caveats about current staffing and the fact that we will not have the new National Working Land staff on board for a while, we feel like we need to prioritize within the National Working Lands work in the near term. And so with that, we're planning to prioritize the National Working Lands Advisory Committee and the National Working Lands inventory work streams in the near term. Both of those work streams underpin much of the rest of the National Working Lands work, and happy to talk more about that as needed. And then finally, given all the variables and considerations, we may need to request legislative deadline changes to have more time to deliver on the work. And that will be an ongoing conversation and assessment. So before I pause here, I'll also note that some of these updates are relevant to the public comment that we received and take into consideration that, for example, there was a comment about prioritizing the National Working Lands inventory. And so that is reflected in the prioritization that we're offering here. And so
Zach, just to add, kind of, I would say we're also going to be prioritizing agency engagement, certainly as part of those priorities, but across the board in terms of next steps on the work. So I think that's an important priority for us. And while it's not specifically identified, it's something you and I are committed to.
Absolutely. Yep. So that is the key status updates, and wanted to pause before we run through the public comment to see if there are any questions or clarifications from the commission.
I don't see any hands up.
Great. All right. Well, questions pop up, definitely feel free to ask as I go through the public comments. So we were able to get 4 written comments. There were 2 focused on details of the National Working Lands work, and 1 comment was from multiple organizations. And I would say that the 2 main categories within the comments were more process-focused comments around the work plan timing, and then more technical comments, for example, pointing to specific technical resources for the commission to consider to inform the work. And I'm going to walk the commission through some of the process-focused ones today, as they're particularly relevant to developing the work plan. And we'll save the technical ones for when we discuss those specific work streams moving forward. And then beyond the National Working Lands focused ones, we received 2 comments focused on additional areas of work. And those comments were focused specifically on carbon sequestration more generally. And I'll talk about those as well towards the end of the run through of the public comments. And then just wanted to say that I also had some good conversations with agencies recently, and there was some interest in the commission also spending more time on adaptation related work. And so that is also something we didn't get formal written comments, but also want to flag for the commission that there was some interest in that. And it's part of the commission's mission, but we don't necessarily have a particularly focused area right now in our work plan, but there's probably some strong overlap with some of the National Working Lands work ahead, where adaptation will also be can also be a consideration. So the next few slides have a lot of text.
Zach, just to clarify, if the public comments aren't up yet, they will be soon. so that people can see. They were shared with all the commissioners in advance of this meeting. So just wanted to
Yeah,
make
and
sure we're aware of that.
thank you, Chair McDonald. And I believe they are on the website, but we can double check that.
Great.
So as I was saying, the next few slides have a lot of text, but we're really trying to give you a sense of some of the key points, as the comments were pretty extensive. And also just to share a bit of staff's initial responses, which you'll see in green text throughout. So again, I'm gonna start with the process-focused natural working lands comments, and those are largely arranged by the corresponding work stream title in the draft work plan that we put out in August. So on the first process-focused slide here, there was a general appreciation for the public comment opportunities already specified in the draft work plan. And we just wanted to note that public comment is very important to this work moving forward. And in addition to the general public comment opportunities that we noted, we also tried to account for where there were specified public comment opportunities in the legislation, for example, on drafts of reports that will go to the legislature. But also just wanted to note that there's also a required public comment opportunity on the biennial fund report, which we didn't specifically note in the draft work plan, but is intended. And as we build out the work plan and start diving into work streams and presenting new work streams, there will be more specifics moving forward, but just wanted to share that we definitely want to be hearing from the public as we go along here. And then there were a number of comments related to the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee work stream. First one was around soliciting broad input on perspectives that should be represented beyond those required in statute, and a related suggestion to request public comment on additional perspectives to be represented on the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee prior to doing the call for applications. And so the commission is required to seek recommendations for committee members from industry and advocacy associations where appropriate. And we're hoping and planning to discuss this at the next Global Warming Commission meeting with the commission so that we can start to frame how we're going to approach the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee work. There was one comment about establishing a nomination and an application process, and there wasn't further discussion of it. So we weren't exactly clear on the distinction sought or the additionality of the nomination and an application process. But if folks have further input on that, we'd certainly welcome clarification there.
So Zach,
Yeah.
just for clarity, both of these comments came in the same comment letter. And so because they were kind of separated, it kind of begged the question for you as to if there was a kind of a separate thought behind the second part.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
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 Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And we, our interpretation at this point, or what we're working under, is it's related to the first comment that came in about just making sure that there's a way for folks to be able to input on what areas of expertise are needed, and to make sure that the call for applications is broad.
Great, thank you. And just as a reminder, we have had a advisory committee that's been operating for the last year to inform the work that the Institute for Natural Resources did. We did send out an application process, applications to a number of organizations and groups representing different related natural resource industries. And we did receive many applicants and had a subcommittee of the board review those. We did have conversations with many of the organizations that helped us circulate the applicant application. And, so I think we have some good experience that we can draw on for this next process.
Thanks, Chair McDonald. And moving to the next comment, which is somewhat related, there was interest in having members of the scientific community on the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee, and also if not on the committee, to have the opportunity for the advisory committee to engage with the scientific community on some of the work products related to natural working lands. And so we're also recommending that the commission discuss scientific community representation on the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee and/or scientific review of the work products, and we can wrap some of that conversation into the conversation around the experience and needs for the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee at the next meeting. And then regarding this last bullet here is regarding tribal outreach and engagement. Folks were interested in us ensuring that it was a separate item in addition to the National Working Lands Advisory Committee, and it is, that's what we intended. The statute requires consultation with the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon. And again, we intend for this tribal engagement to be an independent component, but also there's some overlap as both will help guide the work. So the next slide of comments focuses on the Natural Working Lands baseline metrics and carbon sequestration goals work stream. And most of the comments here focused on the development of the metrics portion of the work. The first comment was about the tight timeline for a consultant to develop the metrics, and basically saying that we would need to start discussing the metrics ASAP. And we do plan, as part of the Institute for Natural Resources report discussion at the next meeting, to start working on and discussing the metrics piece, and we'll further assess the needs and timeline from there as well. Another comment related to here is related to the review by the scientific community of draft activity-based metrics before adoption. We discussed some of that in the previous slide, and so we will continue to discuss this as the work stream is developed. Some of that will be wrapped into the conversation about whether there is and how much there is scientific community representation on the National Working Lands Advisory Committee as we go which we'll discuss at the next meeting. And then there was a comment about work needing to reconcile input in the Institute for Natural Resources process. And again, we're planning to discuss the INR report at the next Global Warming Commission. And so we'll assess the needs and next steps there. And then the last comment here was to provide public comment opportunities on the INR report, which we plan to do. So the next slide wraps up comments on the baseline metrics and sequestration goals, and also shows comments on the inventory. The sequestration related comments here ask the Commission to use the already identified non-binding sequestration goals rather than going through a process to propose new goals. And this is one place certainly the Commission's already identified sequestration goals will help inform the goal conversation. But per House Bill 3409, the Commission has until January 1, 2025 to establish the goals, and must do so in consultation with multiple agencies. And then in addition, in that time, multiple products that can help further inform the goals will be produced, baseline metrics, inventory, and a workforce study. And we're thinking that ideally those would be considered in establishing the goals. And then to finish up this point, there was some there was an ask to provide a clear timeline for public comment on the goals and the work plan. And we do plan to provide that as the work stream is developed. On the National Working Lands inventory, there was a suggestion to prioritize the inventory and baseline, which we mentioned earlier. We plan to do. The inventory is also a deliverable for the federal climate pollution reduction grant that the commission will also be involved in. So there's one more slide here on the National Working Lands comments, and then I'll pause to see if this has sparked anything for any of the commissioners. The last grouping of process-focused comments were around the National Working Land Fund. And so here there was interest in having landowners and land managers have the opportunity to provide input on the structure of any grant programs or other incentive programs, with also a process for considering and incorporating that feedback. And so we do plan to discuss that as the fund work stream is developed. And then there was a comment about not pursuing rulemaking on the fund allocation. The commission in House Bill 3409 was provided authority to do a rulemaking related to determining the allocations for the fund. And so we're still assessing the next steps regarding any needed rulemaking on that, and we'll certainly take these comments into consideration. And then the last point here was to work closely with the state agencies and also to identify opportunities in the near term for investment, with special consideration given to deadlines for leveraging additional federal funding, and to basically create a crosswalk between existing state agency program practices and the practices that the National Working Lands Project has drafted, to understand how many existing state programs already meet some of the natural climate solution objectives, as well as whether new programs might need to be established. So the commission is definitely engaging with the relevant state agencies to help build out the fund work stream. And again, the commission will take these suggestions into consideration. So I'm going to pause there and see if, before we turn to the additional work that folks requested and were interested in, want to see if there are any specific questions on what I've presented related to the National Working Lands related work. Okay, we'll keep moving through here. So as I mentioned, there were some comments that asked for additional areas of work, and those were related to carbon sequestration more generally, not just National Working Lands. And so the first comment was around addressing Oregon's legacy emissions, those emissions that we have historically contributed, and to then set goals and timelines to address those emissions. In addition, encouraging Oregon, having the commission encourage Oregon cities, counties, and tribes to calculate and assist them in setting goals. We don't currently do this. It would require some significant new programming on our end. So we were thinking of, we had this work stream on emerging issues, and we can consider it in there as resources allow. There may be other things that also come up, and we'll continue to assess, but that's how we were thinking of making sure that we don't lose track of this request. And similarly, there was interest in us considering all approaches to greenhouse gas removal and all methods of permanent storage, both natural and technological. The commission is currently focused on natural climate solutions. And again, I think, we could consider technological and emerging issues as resources allow. And then the last two here, one was to support job growth and economic development around the opportunities for greenhouse gas removal and storage. And again, because the commission is focused on natural working lands, natural climate solutions right now, there is some work on this, but we'll be focused on natural working lands. And there's a workforce study that's required as part of the natural working lands work. And then the commission is also working on the last point here, which is to develop plans to increase available state funding for these items. So there's some work happening as we detail out the Natural Working Lands Fund to figure out how to leverage state and federal funding for natural climate solutions. So that's the general gist of the additional areas of work. And as I mentioned at the top of this public comment run through, also in talking with state agencies, there's an effort to implement the adaptation work that is coming out of a lot of state agency coordination, the adaptation framework, and interest in the commission being able to lean in a little bit more on adaptation moving forward. So that concludes all the public comment that we've gotten. And again, happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Zach. That was an excellent presentation.
Thanks.
Any questions for Zach? Okay, well, with that, I think we will move on to our next agenda item. We're a little behind, but I think we will be able to catch up. Really pleased to have Erica Fleischman here who's the director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute, to talk to us about the 6th climate assessment. Erica is not only the director of OCCRI, a professor in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences at Oregon State University. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
You're a little quiet.
Okay. How's that?
That's great.
Okay. It is really a pleasure to be invited to talk with you today. There's some really nice history here. So, for example, as many of you may know, the Global Warming Commission and OCRI were created by the same piece of legislation in 2007. And there was the intent that OCRI support the Global Warming Commission. And so it's really nice to have the opportunity to talk with you and to think more about how we can dovetail some of our activities where there's nice overlap there. So what I'm going to be doing today is giving you a quick overview of OCRI. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not, and then really focusing on trying to prompt your thoughts on what OCRI can do in its next climate assessment, the 7th Oregon Climate Assessment, and how OCRI and the Global Warming Commission can work together in general more effectively. So I'm going to be giving you an overview of the topics that were in the 6th Oregon Climate Assessment, which came out in January of this year. With a couple of exceptions, I'm not going to focus on the actual content of the assessment. So I'm not going to focus on what we said in the assessment in terms of actual inferences or what have you. And for that, I refer you to the assessment itself, which is available on OCRI's website. And if you have any difficulty finding that, let me know. So Zach, I don't know if you're actually in the driver's seat, but thank you for being willing to run the slides. And so if we could move on to the next one, please. I always like starting with this makes me laugh. Even as we try to mitigate, the world is not going to change to suit us. So we are going to be doing some changing, and gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to? Anyhow, next, please. So the quickie overview of OCRI. We were established in 2007, again, by the same piece of legislation that created the Global Warming Commission. And we are hosted by Oregon State University, but we are not an entity entirely owned by Oregon State University. We're intended in that legislation to facilitate research by Oregon's public universities, so the major universities, the community colleges, on climate change and its effects on Oregon's natural and human systems. We're intended to provide technical support to the Global Warming Commission and to agencies throughout Oregon. And because Oregon State University is our financial home, it's fairly straightforward for us to be able to do the paperwork that allows us to support state agencies. You'd be amazed, well, none of you would be amazed how much time we spend on paperwork. Next, please. We work pretty closely with the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the processes that they lead, which is really a productive relationship that we're proud of. So one of the things that we do, for example, is providing county level projections of future climate to inform county natural hazard mitigation plans and updates to the state's natural hazard mitigation plan. We try to provide information to the public that takes a variety of different forms. For example, we're about to have a page launch on the Oregon Explorer within the next couple of weeks. We do a lot of presentations to, you name it, involved in various forms of education. So for example, we're participating in a new OSU extension course in Hood River, and we do a lot of media interviews. Next, please. Some of you may not be aware that the Oregon Climate Service, which is the Office of Oregon State Climatologist, is administratively embedded within OCRI. So the Oregon Climate Service does what climate offices usually do. There's a big component that's weather, and there's a big component that is climate and climate change. The state climatologist serves on a lot of the committees that advise the governor's office on drought declarations and that contribute to national monitoring of drought. So for example, the National Drought Monitor. And these types of activities really have financial consequences. We try to be an honest broker, provide objective information, but these types of activities really affect the types of support available to the agricultural sector, to the forestry sector, to various communities that are affected by extreme events, especially. Next, please. The Oregon climate assessments are mandated in our enabling legislation. These are biennial and they're peer-reviewed. So we talk about the new understanding of climate science, not strictly restricted to Oregon's boundaries, but certainly applicable to Oregon and the likely effects of climate change on the state. Our primary audience is decision makers. We also are aiming to inform the media and to inform Oregon residents. And the way that we have published the last several assessments explicitly is under a Creative Commons license that allows basically good faith non-commercial use. So the contributors to the climate assessments can reuse the information that they put into the assessments for whatever kind of good faith purpose they want. Other people can take pieces of the assessment and reproduce it or adapt it to their purposes. We don't want to have a copyright on this information so that it can't be used by others. That is in part really important to us because although OCRI leads the assessments and people who are pretty tightly associated with OCRI are the lead authors on pieces of the assessments, we are really grateful for the generosity and expertise of a much larger community of people within Oregon, outside Oregon, in the university system, outside the university system, you name it. There are dozens of people that contribute to each of the climate assessments. They are extraordinarily generous. We couldn't do it without them. And so we really want to enable them to be able to capitalize on what they're contributing to these assessments. We don't want to hold it close to our chests. Next, please. The 5th and 6th assessments, so published in 2021 and 2023, we tried to align the structure with that of the natural hazards mitigation plans and with the state's climate change adaptation framework. You all are pretty familiar with the climate change adaptation framework, I believe, multi-agency response to climate change, emphasizing an equity lens, emphasizing interagency collaboration. Next, please. So the structure of both of these assessments has been relatively similar, and we are likely to follow a generally similar template for the 7th assessment. So we have an executive summary, 2 pages, that's actually mandated, general introduction, not a surprise there. And then we try to highlight what is new understanding of natural hazards in the state, or of maybe some understanding that may not be new within the last 2 years, but hasn't been covered in these assessments before, and where there's a lot of interest. So something that we're likely to cover in the 7th assessment is what's going on with climate change and El Nino. Where are the uncertainties, what's known, what's not known. No doubt some good science will come out in the next 2 years, but we also will be covering what's been known for a longer period of time, still pretty germane to what the public's thinking about, what the legislature might be planning for, what the media is asking us lots of questions about. So in the 6th assessment, we covered these topics: temperature, drought, we got into the water cycle, looked at wildfire, we're probably always going to be looking at wildfire, and coastal hazards. Next, please. And then following on the overall structure of the climate change adaptation framework, we're looking at the 6 themes that the adaptation framework highlighted with respect to adaptation strategies. So in the language used in the adaptation framework: economy, natural world, built environment and infrastructure, public health, cultural heritage, and social systems. We are not going to cover all of these every single time, but in general, we're trying to hit on something related to each of these adaptation strategies. And exactly what we hit on, in part, depends on the feedback that we get from people like the people that I'm talking with today. Next, please. So again, as I am talking to you about what was in the 6th assessment, please keep in your mind, what would you like to see in the upcoming assessment? And what are potential ways to strengthen collaboration between our groups on various evaluations and assessments? I actually keep a running list, starting probably during the preparation of a given assessment, of what we might cover in the next one. So I have a full page of ideas already. I'm not going to tell you what those are, but you know, the more ideas we can get, the timing is great, because before the end of the year, I will start very sweetly making requests, twisting arms, what have you, taking advantage of people who are enthused about making contributions to the next assessment. So next, please. So I'm going to walk you through what we covered in a general sense in the 6th assessment. So the introduction: what's new with observed and projected trends in temperature and precipitation. This doesn't change too much from assessment to assessment, but you know, more years, so we update the trends and provide an overview of some of the advances in climate science. So next, there were 2 that we touched on in the 6th assessment. Those were Arctic amplification, and I'll get ahead of myself for a second by saying we also talked about wind speeds. So there have been a lot of questions in the past couple of years about what's going on with the polar vortex. And we thought, well, let's walk through what is known and what is not known about the contribution of disproportionate warming in the Arctic. That is not in doubt. To severe weather in the mid-latitudes. That is in doubt. Those of you, you're probably all aware of this. Northwestern Oregon hits right around 45 degrees. So we are right smack in the mid-latitudes. And the bottom line, this is where I'm actually going to tell you one of the things that's in the assessment. The likely effect is small. There's a lot of uncertainty, but the likely effect is small, and it's probably greater during summer than winter. So not Arctic amplification, probably not a major contributor to Oregon's winter weather. Next. Changes in wind speed, obviously a lot of concern about what wind means for wildfire ignition, what it means for the electricity grid during any season. Lots and lots of uncertainty in this, but we synthesized what is known, and for that matter, what the uncertainties are. And again, the bottom line here, any increases in wind speeds are actually most likely that there will be increases, to the extent that there are any, during winter storms. Because winter storms are projected to become more intense. Summertime actually possibly decreases. if anything, in wind speeds. So many of you are aware the risk with wind speeds in summer is basically when we get those strong easterly winds now or high winds anywhere else, they're more likely to coincide with dry conditions and with high heat. So it's not that wind is changing, it's that when we have strong winds, they're more likely to coincide with other elements of fire weather. Next, please. We had one chapter that for many people is frankly pretty wonky. But what are CMIPs? What are these coupled model intercomparison projects? You hear about CMIP 5 and CMIP 6. They're the sources of the climate projections or climate ensembles that underpin the IPCC's scenarios. So we got into what are these? Why are they different? How does it matter? Again, this is pretty wonky, but it's a nice synthesis of what the models are, what the uncertainties are. So if any of you have heard about hot models, we go into a lot of detail about what's happening with CMIP 6. Okay, next, please. Some of the natural hazards that we discussed in the 6th assessment, we got into extreme temperatures, synthesized some of the information there about trends, got into what is the heat index and how are heat index and temperature similar and different in Oregon, actually much more similar in Oregon than many other parts of the United States. And we talked about what is currently known about the extent to which climate change contributed to the magnitude of the 2021 heat dome. Next, please. Drought, again, got into definitions of drought. So drought, what you call drought really lies in the eye of the beholder. Lots of different ways to define drought. Depending on the definition, differences in trends, and what is known again about the effects of climate change on drought. So it's not just precipitation, lots of other things going on with drought. Next, please. One thing that we did with respect to changes in the water cycle that we thought was kind of new, and we try to make this fun. I mean, we try to bring in it's not like reading a good novel, but to bring in things that may be of interest to people or kind of new, where people go, huh, that's kind of, yeah, I never really knew about that. That's neat. So we wanted to hit on community science. So has been called citizen science, has been called public participation in scientific research. Technically, all those things are slightly different, but basically community observations, community contributions, a lot of those are related to water. And so we talked about how community observations are contributing to PRISM, to CoCoRaHS, those are national efforts. Community snow observations, mountain rain or snow. So there are lots of different community science programs related to water, to hydrology. And so we talked about what those are, how they are taking advantage of community science data, not only as a way to engage community members, but to really strengthen scientific understanding of the water cycle and how that affects humans and natural systems in Oregon. So next, wildfires, trends and drivers in wildfires. What we really focused on in the 6th assessment was some of the social aspects of wildfires. So there were a lot of surveys that went out, both about people who were exposed to the wildfire flames and people who were exposed to the wildfire smoke in 2020. And people that led those efforts very kindly summarized what is currently understood about how those experiences with wildfires and wildfire smoke affected behaviors, affected policy preferences, including public's, shutting off the electricity. I'm not getting the acronym quite right now. And also what communities said they needed, what their concerns were and what they said they needed as far as resources to be better prepared in the future. Next, please. Coastal hazards, trends in sea level. It is always highly unsatisfying to a lot of people, including us, that we can't just say, gosh, sea level is going to go up X much all along the Oregon coast. So we tried to get into why is it kind of difficult to say exactly what sea level rise is going to be at a particular location. Also talk about advances in scientific understanding of what sea level rise and sort of overall coastal storminess means for a number of the hazards in these areas, and then what various communities are trying to do to adapt to those hazards. Next. Something that we did not cover in the 5th assessment, but covered in the 6th assessment was economics. And so we talked about how economists estimate how climate change is going to affect various types of costs, and talked about sector-specific economic impacts in Oregon. Hopefully, we will have updates on several of these sector-specific impacts in the 7th assessment. Next, with respect to natural systems, we focused on what was emerging at that point with the effects of the heat dome on forests. Again, how community science too is contributing to that understanding. And somewhat paradoxically to some people, how some of the places where water is warming actually can be a nice resource for some of Oregon's cold water fishes. Next, please. We did something different also with the built environment, and here we were really grateful that several people at the Global Warming Commission contributed to peer review and strengthening this chapter. We looked at land use law and climate change. So several people at University of Oregon Law School led a chapter on the effects of land use law on adaptation and mitigation, looked at where the statewide land use planning goals affect responses, looked at some particular sectors, and looked at some of the effects of Oregon's legislation related to housing and zoning, and also to climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. I think at the end of the day, there probably were some differences of opinion, but I feel really good about how the chapter came out in terms of kind of looking at some of the different perspectives and hopefully encouraging cordial and productive debate on some of these issues in the future. Next, please. With respect to public health, we also tended to focus on wildfire, given that that has been something that has occupied so much of Oregon's attention in recent years, as has extreme heat. We will looking at a wider range of topics in, at least collectively, in future assessments. So we had a really nice synthesis of research on composition and toxicity of smoke. It's not all PM 2.5. And we looked at how wildfire smoke is affecting the hospital system. So there are some pretty good estimates that are evidence-based of how smoke of various durations stresses the hospital system, not only for taking care of people who have smoke-related illnesses, but who have other conditions. So how does that surge in need for care during smoke events affect other needs? Next, please. We had a nice section on tribal resilience to climate change, and with the participation of the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, our authors were all early career tribal citizens. And they talked about how their tribal communities are responding to climate change through a variety of mechanisms, from ceremony to education to workforce development. So we were really pleased to be able to work with these people and to be able to represent their array of perspectives. Coming to the end. So the next section, next please, that we address. So with respect to social systems, we looked at two areas. One was we looked at art and climate change. So art does a number of things. It can inform the audience about climate change. It can try to spark engagement and conversation, and it can try to change society. And so one of our colleagues, Dominique Bachelet, who is both an expert on climate change and an artist herself, synthesized this information. A lot of artists very generously allowed us to use images of their work in this section, and we do hope to follow up on topics related to art in the future. Next. And we also addressed regenerative agriculture. So no standard definition of regenerative agriculture. What do people usually mean when they talk about it? To what extent are agricultural practices do they have the potential to affect carbon storage? And beyond that, what other types of generally desirable outcomes come along with the practices that generally are grouped under regenerative agriculture? So next, please. This is all hopefully to spark your ideas. What do you want to see in the future? and how can we work together more effectively? And I know that I just blazed through the entire good grief 200+ page Oregon climate assessment, and you can actually thank me for that. But again, it's all on our website, all available for free download. I'm happy to answer any questions about the actual content or to put you in touch with the authors of various chapters who know way more than me. So I open it up to your thoughts on what do you want to see in the future? Even better, you can help us, but we're happy to just know what you'd like to see.
Thank you, Erica. Really, really helpful. Do commissioners have specific questions? Commissioner Reitman.
My comment is I just want to thank you for your work. It's kind of unsung and behind the scenes, and I'm glad to be more aware of what you're doing and just express our appreciation for your work. And yes, I'd like to be more involved going forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I don't know how much of this should be in future assessments and how much might be opportunities for collaboration. A couple things came to mind for me. Certainly, it's really helpful to have information on the IPCC latest information that comes out, and especially as we think about updating our sector-based goals and natural and working land goals in the future. And so, you know, that is a really important piece. And then any additional work you can do to kind of help us think through future goals would be, I think, based on that information would be beneficial. And Zach, I'll let you jump in on that in just a minute. The other couple of thoughts I had was we produced some economic information as part of the technical work to inform the roadmap. It might be interesting to look at how we might further assess that in the next assessment, perhaps, or again, as maybe a special project. And then the third thing that came to mind is, you know, one of the things that we need to do across the board that came to mind for me as part of the natural and working lands science or work that we're doing. And that is, you know, collaborating on helping us with social science that might help us best design ways of helping landowners adopt new practices. And to Commissioner Reitman's point earlier, a lot of good things are already happening by landowners making decisions, but we are still kind of, you know, in the early part of the curve of uptake for some of the practices. And we did some survey work as part of developing the natural and working lands proposal of landowners and vision analysis of quite a bit of input that we did get, but I could see the need for that going forward as part of how we think about the natural and working lands work, but imagine it could also be something that would be beneficial in the other sectors. So those were a few things that came to mind for me. And
super.
There are other commissioners and directors that have thoughts about how we can better collaborate and what would be helpful. And oh, I guess one other question for you, Erica. When do you start working on the assessment? What's the timeline for beginning to end typically?
Starting to think about it now, starting to request input from our, basically request people to write sections between now and the end of the year. So I guess we work on it for about definitely the full year before it comes out. Probably, I would say about 15 months.
Right.
So then we take a deep breath and then we start all over again in fall of the year before the next one comes out. Yeah, we have about 9 months breather, and then we're working on it again.
Appreciate that. Other thoughts on how we might collaborate more in the future? Zach, do you want to add anything? I know you spent quite a bit of time with the sixth assessment and obviously with all of our work. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair McDonald. I turned on my video right before you jumped in with your thoughts, and I was just gonna underscore the science part of it and helping us understand the best available science and assess the best available science, particularly with the direction from the legislation coming out of last session for us to periodically be assessing that science and looking to inform our state goals. So I thought you said it really well and don't have more to add. Thanks.
The only other thought that came to mind for me as you were presenting, and I didn't go back and look at the sixth assessment right before this meeting, but you know, it seems like how precipitation was going to change generally was has been less certain than temperature. And in the last couple of years, you know, we've certainly seen a lot more impact on precipitation with more intense storms, you know, in different parts of the country. So it'd be interesting to get a good idea about kind of how that certainty has tightened up and you know how that might touch down here in Oregon in terms of that intensity of the storms.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no other questions, comments, and if are you able to stay on with us through the break and in case people conjure up some additional questions for you? Great.
Yep.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and take our break now. We are scheduled to come back at 1:30. And then we can take stock if there are any final questions for Erica, and then move on to our next topic. So really appreciate all the great work you put into this, and we will definitely give it some more thought and look for more ways of collaborating in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
If folks could come off on video just long enough so I can tell who's back and when we're ready to go. Great. Looks like most people are back. We'll go ahead and let's give it another 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay, we will resume the October 9th meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. Before we left, we offered if anybody had another thought that they wanted to share with Erica on ways we could collaborate while you were on break, or a question, feel free to ask it now, and then we'll turn to our next agenda item. Okay. Seeing none. Thank you again, Erica, for the great presentation and especially the offer of finding ways to further collaborate and get input from us on the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity. And if you think of things in the coming weeks, please feel free to get in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to our next agenda item, and I want to welcome Dr. Leif Rasmussen, who is the co-chair of the Oregon Coordinating Council on Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia, and his colleague Jenny Kester, who is the Ocean Acidification Assistant Project Lead. And but really appreciate having them both here to talk about this really important area of the impacts of climate change on Oregon resources. Both are housed with ODFW, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, who houses the council. So appreciate having you both here and looking forward to your presentation.
And we also have Dr. Lori Juranic, who's also the co-chair of the OAH Council with me from OSU Online. She's been teaching all day. I think her voice is a little tired, so I'm going to cover most things. She can chime in if I misspeak, and Jenny can also chime in if I misspeak as well.
Excellent.
So,
thank you and welcome.
Go ahead and change to the next slide, Zach. So effectively what we're going to cover today is just kind of the state of science of ocean acidification hypoxia, just kind of introduce the concepts and where we've gone with things, how Oregon's taken action, how the OAH Council was formed and the efforts we've gone through kind of to establish this group. I'm relatively new, so again, this is going to be a situation where if I misspeak, Lori or Jenny are going to correct me and tell me I said something wrong. I apologize. And the international and regional coordinations that this council has kind of allowed us to participate in and kind of make Oregon a really powerful player, even though we are just a subnational at the national and international levels. And then come on some of our thoughts on aligning our priorities with the Global Warming Commission, and then just like Erica, time for questions and comments. We definitely want to try and align with you as much as we can, gain from each other, since there's a lot of crossover in the work we do. Next slide, Zach. So first off, the science of OAH, why it's happening, and the impacts. Our next slide. So actually, Jenny, do you want to cover these first ones?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. So just to begin, I want to start with a baseline of what is causing ocean acidification. So likely everyone in this meeting is familiar with the Keeling curve, this graph that I have pulled up. And this red kind of squiggly line that goes upward represents the increasing carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And something that you all might be less familiar with is this green kind of noisy line that follows the red line that represents the dissolved carbon dioxide, or PCO2, within our oceans. So we can see from this figure that as our atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased, as has our dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean. And that's a simple diffusion process. And then as a result of this increasing dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean, you can see this blue line that trends downward, and that's the pH in the ocean. So we have this direct correlation, where as the PCO2 increases, our acidity has been decreasing over time. Next slide, please. And so ocean acidification is the process that occurs as we have that dissolved carbon dioxide in the water, leading to those pH changes. And that's one aspect of our council, but the other aspect we have is sort of the sister of ocean acidification, or ocean hypoxia. And within the Pacific Northwest specifically, a lot of our ocean hypoxia is driven by upwelling and changes in upwelling due to climate change. In particular, we have fantastic upwelling on the Oregon coast. It's what fuels a lot of our great productivity in this area. But when there's times when the upwelling happens at different prolonged periods of times or at different strengths, what we'll see is so many nutrients will come up from above that it'll fuel a mass plankton bloom. And this plankton will grow and grow and grow, and eventually it'll reach its carrying capacity or overreach it, and everything will die off. And once it dies off, that results in a lot of decomposition that draws a lot of oxygen out from the water. And this can turn into what some people refer to as dead zones, or areas of hypoxia or low oxygen. And how climate change kind of fits in here is that our upwelling processes are highly impacted by winds. And as we know, climate change is leading to alterations of wind and weather patterns, and that's leading to what we're seeing is more frequent and stronger hypoxic events. Next slide, please. So to give a brief example of what some data looks like in Oregon regarding hypoxia, we can look at an observation that's really close to Cape Perpetua, one of our marine reserves on the central Oregon coast. So on this figure, you'll see a black line that represents the average dissolved oxygen from 2009 to 2021. These gray bars are going to show your standard deviation, and the red line will be your 2021 dissolved oxygen levels in this area in central coastal Oregon. And if you could just advance the slide really quick, I think there will be a little change. Yes, what I specifically want to point out here is that we're seeing levels of dissolved oxygen that are near zero. So it's very difficult for an organism to survive in low oxygen conditions. About 1.4 milliliters per liter is what we consider hypoxic or very low oxygen. But we're actually seeing levels that are near zero. And so that's incredibly difficult for an organism to survive when there's no oxygen around. Next slide, please. And what's important to point out here is that as we have different levels of oxygen in the water, there are a variety of different impacts to the ecosystem. So if we have a full oxygen saturation, we're looking at normal behavior, business as usual. But as we decrease our oxygen saturation, we'll see that mobile species, those species that can get away, will get away. Eventually, we'll see fish and crab leave the area. But even as it decreases, we'll have changes to the biogeochemistry of the soil, microbial mats forming, and at 0% oxygen, no macrofauna is going to be able to survive. Next slide, please. And one more slide. And okay, and I can go into a little bit about what the Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council has done and what Oregon has done to act on this issue. Next slide, please. So in 2017, the Oregon Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council was established through Senate Bill 1039. This founding piece of legislation made sure that our council would be in action. It designated our seats, and it provided no sunset for our council. So essentially we'll be existing as long as ocean acidification and hypoxia is an issue. Next slide, please. Our council is made up of a diverse 13-seat group. In this image, you'll see the top left familiar faces, Dr. Lori Juranic and Dr. Leif Rasmussen, who are our co-chairs. And we also have a variety of representation on the council representing 3 different agencies, the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, Oregon Sea Grant, a conservation and recreation seat, 2 members of the harvest and fishing community, an academic, a tribal community member, and then a representative from the Oregon Governor's Office, specifically the Natural Resources Department. Next slide, please. And what our work covers is essentially 5 main themes, and these themes are borrowed from the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, which really prompted a lot of these action plans being formed all across the West Coast. So specifically, our actions, theme 1 focuses on gathering more information and better understanding the science around ocean acidification and hypoxia. Theme 2 specifically targets ways that we can reduce the causes of ocean acidification and hypoxia. Specifically, that's going to be carbon dioxide management and mitigation. And those will include greenhouse gas reduction techniques. Our third theme is finding ways to have more adaptation and resilience within our natural ecosystems to ocean acidification and hypoxia. Our fourth theme is spreading more information about ocean acidification and hypoxia, whether it be with local communities or with policymakers. And our last theme is developing more coordination and more work together with different agencies or entities in Oregon to help combat this issue. So our meeting here today is really all about that theme 5 and just learning ways that we can better work together. Next slide, please. And I won't let you know everything that we've done since we've been started in 2017, but a couple of our biggest accomplishments and that are noteworthy for this conversation is that in 2019, we developed Oregon's Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Action Plan. This is a 6-year action plan that was adopted by the Governor's Office, and we are beginning to plan for our next action plan. We also produce biennial reports in even years, and those are updates to what we have done on our action plan and where we intend to go. Additionally, we've hosted 5 fishermen scientists ocean acidification and hypoxia roundtables in collaboration with Sea Grant. And essentially, these are opportunities for at-risk industry members in the fishing community to sit down with scientists and managers to talk about what to expect coming up, what are they seeing, and what questions they have going forward. It also is a great way to expand trust within those 2 groups, because as we know, as ocean and climate change advances, we're going to see changes in this arena. Additionally, we coordinated a multi-agency report on ocean acidification and hypoxia. And although this is only a report, it was a great opportunity to get our 8 agencies that have a nexus with OAH to communicate each other and talk about ways that they want to work together on ways to address this issue, especially keeping the efficient use of state resources in mind. Really recently in 2021, we supported the passage of House Bill 3114, and this was a novel investment on ocean acidification and hypoxia within the state of Oregon. $1.9 million were allocated towards 13 different projects, and they span from gathering more information to getting adaptation and resilience strategies. And we're also developing an ocean acidification and hypoxia communications plan that should be done by the end of next year, which is exciting. And lastly, the first symposium ever on ocean acidification and hypoxia was organized earlier this year, and it was an opportunity for those who were funded by this $1.9 million investment to share out with the public on what we are learning and where we've come. Next slide, please. And so just as an update then again on that House Bill 3114, we were really pleased to have that passed, and we are looking forward to the results from that. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll step back in at this point. So like I said, the OAH Council has been a great nexus for us within Oregon, but Oregon has really been a leader kind of on the national and international scale. And so these are kind of some of the things that this council has allowed us to move into those different other arenas as we move forward. So next slide. So the first one, probably something that many of you are partners with, is that there is the Pacific Coast Collaborative, the PCC, that many of us are aware of. There is a subcommittee for OAH that has then since broken off and become the OA Alliance, which we'll go into more on the next slide. But this group has really done a lot of work to kind of form a cross-border efforts to look at ocean change kind of centralized messaging associated with OAH so that the whole West Coast is looking at things in a unified front or presenting it in a unified front. And things like that, again, really with the main goal of a centralized message for the West Coast. In our introduction to science, you know, ocean acidification is hitting the West Coast of the United States harder than anywhere else. So this is really the place where these kind of things need to be brought up. And so this is why the PCC is a really good group to be able to push that messaging. So that's one of the arenas we work in. Next slide, please. And then, like I said, the PCC is spurred off into the Ocean Acidification Alliance, which has now become a UN foundation, and or yes, one of the foundations of the UN. And this has become an international effort that works with many groups to establish action plans throughout the world to combat ocean acidification. As you can see, looking right here on their website, on the top row is Oregon. We were one of the first groups, and we have been kind of an important group that is cited and referenced going forward by many other countries and subnationals and things like that. So while we are just a state, we do really have some important precedents that we have set for many other groups in the past. So that's just a nice benefit that has come from our work. Our next slide. So that's what we have for kind of our background of what we've done, trying to keep things kind of quick and easy. So then our next thought is we chatted, Lori, Jenny, and I, a little bit about how we thought we might be able to align with you at the Oregon Global Warming Commission. But again, this is just us thinking and spitballing. We're totally open. We'd love to have more conversations. We hope that this collaboration can really become something that's more consistent, more permanent, as we definitely have a lot of things where we're crossing over with one another as in our works. So here's some examples of shared priorities in both of ours, is we both have things that are discussing limited climate change impacts on Oregon's cultural and economic viability, including the fishing industry. We have a fishing industry seat. I know you guys are going to be adding one. That's something we can definitely partner with you on. Reducing the causes of climate change is also in both of our plans. Mitigate and adapt to climate change through advancing natural climate and natural working land solutions. Again, so many similarities in the types of things we're doing that it would be really beneficial for us, I think, to formalize and continue to really collaborate as we continue going forward. Next slide. So here's kind of our next big steps we have as a council. We do need to draft and put together our 2024 legislative report. And then we're also that House Bill 3114 that Jenny was talking about. We're just finalizing that. So we have kind of the wrap up of those, with the final wrap up being a communications plan that the council can be using to help us going forward and introducing this information. And then the last thing is we will be developing our next action plan for dissemination in 2025. Next slide. So that's our contact information. That's what we have. So I guess kind of like Erica, we'd like to just kind of point out, are there things where you guys think we can partner, questions for us, thoughts? Lori, do you want to chime in quickly? Have anything you want to say?
I do have one thing I'd like to add. So especially keeping note that we're going to develop our action plan once again in 2025. This is a great opportunity for us to put our heads together and think about ways that we can support your work moving forward, and we can advocate for work that benefits both of us.
That's great. Thank you. Great presentation. Really interesting to hear about the work that you're doing, and it's such an important area of impact that we need to be having front and center in our thinking. One question for me, and then I'll open it up for other commissioners. How closely do you connect with OCRE, and does your information kind of get integrated, or do you do any kind of cross-posting of the work that you're advancing and the work that OCRE does?
So to my knowledge, there hasn't been much cross-pollinating between the two groups. Like I said, I'm relatively new, so Jenny or Lori tell me if I'm wrong, but Jenny and I were just talking after Erica's talk during the break that that's something we feel like we should increase and build a better relationship, because there's definitely a good nexus between us doing those kind of things.
Yeah, I know coordination with OCRE is within our action plan, and it's something that we have found to be a priority moving forward. I do believe at the beginnings of the council, there was more coordination, but we have had some changes in seats. And I think some of those connections had been lost, but that's definitely something that we intend to put back together moving forward.
That's great. One of the things we've been considering is just the public, doesn't really know where all to look for things. So being able to be something of a clearinghouse for information and current things, to have some cross posting on our commission website is something that would be great to do. And then potentially with as Zach mentioned earlier, with some of our seats for state agencies moving over to being on the commission, there may be some opportunity to collaborate more formally, in part by having representation on the commission. So it'd be great to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Other comments, questions, thoughts about how to collaborate?
Commissioner Reitman here again. I'm glad to always learn more about things that I didn't know about before, but it seems kind of discouraging because I don't see anything specific that we can do other than the suite of mitigation that we do, climate change mitigation. But I'm curious why is it worse off the Oregon coast than other places? The prevailing west wind from Asia, is that why, or are we just unlucky?
Lori, are you comfortable chiming in with that? You're far more skilled at the chemistry than the rest of us.
Sure.
Really quick. Thank you.
Yeah, and pardon my voice. I'm losing my voice. So, yeah, so it has to do with a little bit of the shape of our coastline and retentiveness of water as it's upwelled. So if we have really strong upwelling and it's blown offshore really quickly, that keeps a fresh supply of at least not super low oxygen. It's low oxygen what's coming up. But if we get upwelling and then we get reversals of winds and things kind of stagnate, it allows that production to be deposited locally and consume the oxygen locally. And then that's when you get a big problem. So it has to do with intermittency of winds and how broad the shelf is. Generally speaking, we have a narrow coastline, but there's places around Hecata Bank where there's a little bit more retentiveness in the circulation, and that can matter too, to things kind of getting trapped.
Thank you, Lauren.
Other questions or comments, thoughts about collaboration? We'll definitely give it some more thought, really appreciate the opportunity to look for ways to better collaborate going forward.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, great. And I would just encourage the commissioners to take a look at the work that we just heard about more closely, as well as the 6th assessment that Erica presented earlier, and to follow up with thoughts on collaboration. You're welcome to send them to Zach and I, and we can combine ideas and get those forwarded to the two groups of presenters that we heard from today. So thank you. So one thing I'd like to have folks do, if you haven't already, let us know if you want to comment during the public comment period. If you could let us know while we're listening to the next presentation, just so that, oh, I'm sorry. Jenny, Hester? You have your,
Sorry, that was a mistake. I'll unraise my hand.
okay, thank you. So let us know if you want to provide public testimony. We are now a little ahead of schedule, so I don't see any reasons why we won't have plenty of time, but do let us know. We'd appreciate that. And with that, I'll turn to our last presentation. Commissioner Decker and Garrett Martin are with us here from the PUC. At our last meeting, we touched very briefly. Commissioner Decker gave us a bit of an overview of what is happening relative to the integrated resource planning that the utilities do and the commission assesses. But we wanted to, it's such an important area of work, as we discussed in the roadmap, the importance of getting the programs that are in House Bill 2021 that was focused on electric utilities and the CPP work that also includes our natural gas utility, getting those right and making sure that they're being supported for effective implementation is really critical. So I think it's important for the commission to continue to kind of keep the work that's needed to make these things happen front of mind. So I appreciate Commissioner Decker's willingness to kind of give us a deeper view of this work. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Commissioner Decker.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate those opening remarks because I think they match the message that I'm hoping to get across today and that I, have been trying to deliver in this forum as we talk more broadly about energy and climate policy. So I'm glad to be here, and my goal is to just give people who are less familiar with the PUC a bit of background on utility planning and how the new climate policies come into that space. They both change that space and they change the relevance of that space to how Oregon is meeting its climate goals. And so I appreciate the interest in hearing from us here. As Chair McDonald kind of noted, these new policies establishing decarbonization requirements for regulated electric and natural gas utilities have made utility planning processes that we've had in place for a long time a central place to talk about how decarbonization is proceeding and what adjustments and supports the utilities need to accomplish what is really a very big role in the state's climate policy landscape. And so my ask is just that you remember, as Chair McDonald obviously did with her opening remarks, that utility climate mandates are not self-executing emissions reductions. To work within affordability and reliability parameters for the energy sector, things like state and federal funding, support, and regional cooperation are critical. And from my perspective, we talk about accelerating climate goals. We really need the energy and climate community to lean in and learn whether the pieces are in place for the emissions reductions that we've already mandated to be successful. And my presentation will hopefully highlight some ways to get that understanding and, if desired, to play a role there. So let's go to my first slide. I think somebody else's, yeah, there we go. This is just some background context. I think everybody knows that the PUC regulates investor-owned electric and natural gas utilities, and that for decades, utilities have presented integrated resource plans in our forum. Integrated resource plans are sort of the biggest picture way that the utility explains its strategy for selecting a least cost, least risk portfolio of resources to meet its customers' needs. There are also today kind of subsidiary planning processes, such as planning for the distribution system, which is the kind of neighborhood scale energy system, and planning for for transportation electrification, things like that. But integrated resource planning is kind of the big picture balance between the customer loads and the resources, and how the utility is going to keep those together and make good decisions about that over the long term. They happen every 2 years. And in between those, if there's a resource need, the utilities, the electric utilities anyway, will have procurement processes that are also overseen by the commission. I think everyone knows that for electric utilities, HB 2021 is the policy primarily in question, and for gas utilities, it's the climate protection program that created these decarbonization requirements. But if you go to the next slide, you'll get a better picture of the policy-rich environment. Let's go to the next slide, that we are living in. And there's a lot here, and there is a lot. It's not a coincidence, right? It's really remarkable how different the policy landscape is from, even sort of 2007, which you see on the left side there, where what utilities were planning for is sort of a particular technology or set of technologies to have a slice of their resource stack. And as you go sort of across this timeline, the policies become much more climate focused and sort of holistic and sort of capturing a number of other objectives besides just technologies coming onto the system or even emissions focus. They're really capturing justice issues and some technology change issues, and you even see on here sort of climate adaptation issues with the wildfire protection planning. I'll leave you to look at this slide further at your leisure, but let's go to the next slide. And just remember that plans today have to take on all of that policy, and our focus and goal is to make the PUC review process for utility planning an open and honest dialogue about whether the utilities are taking the reasonable steps in the right direction. With all of that change, it's understandable that we may not get everything exactly right the first time around. This slide dives into what the sort of PUC focused parts of, or particularly the PUC focused parts of HB 2021 are requiring. And again, this applies to both the two major investor-owned utilities in the state, as well as entities that provide power to very large customers that choose not to get their power from the utilities. I don't want to go into great detail on this. I think most people on this meeting probably understand what's in HB 2021. I think I'll just focus on where it says planning and protections there. A major feature of HB 2021 is the requirement that utilities file clean energy plans, and those are going to kind of sit either alongside or nested with the integrated resource plan, and are going to give us a special focus on a few things that are specific to HB 2021, but also to the actions that the utilities are taking to put themselves in a position to meet those requirements, whether, anyway, in HB 2021 that really began in 2030 with that 80% reduction. There's lots of other things here. I think you see HB 2021 had a small scale resources requirement. It requires a focus on community benefits that's different than what we've had in the past, and also offers some local government choice options that didn't exist before, and the utilities are working on all of those things along with the commission. But let's move to the next slide and just take a look at the basic provisions of the Climate Protection Program, which applies to the natural gas utilities. And so I don't have much to say here. This obviously is a program that was adopted by DEQ, but it's arguably an aggressive sort of reduction in emissions from the natural gas sector over the timeline that you see there. I think the thing that's worth noting about both of these policies is that neither one says kind of how the utility has to do it. HB 2021 has a small scale resource requirement, but the CPP just sort of says you got to get there. And the place functionally right now where the utility is evaluating different options for how they're going to get there is in the integrated resource plan that comes to the PUC. So let's go to the next slide. This slide is here, and it'll be familiar from the Tigger roadmap, but it's here to underscore, and I should have an arrow pointing to the CPP wedge here, but the HB 2021 is that big blue wedge that the arrow is pointing to, and then I'm pretty sure that the Climate Protection Program is the next one there. It's a little difficult to distinguish the greens, but this is just here to underscore when I say that utility planning plays a big role in Oregon meeting its climate goals. It's because that is, to my eye, more than half of the emissions reductions that we're seeing on any particular place in the timeline, and I think that kind of speaks for itself.
Commissioner Decker, you're very correct. That second wedge is CPP.
Okay, wonderful. All right, let's move to the next slide.
With one caveat that most of those, that's the remaining climate protection programs after you take out CAFE, Clean Fuels Program, Clean Fuel Program Expansion, Advanced Clean Cars 2, Trucks, Advanced Clean Cars 2. So all of those, the pink one, second one from the bottom, or the pink one up through the green one, are all CPP.
Okay. I think it's fair to say that the green represents the slice that utility integrated resource plans from the gas companies are solving for. I think that's the point, I guess, I'm trying to make. So let's go to the next slide, and this is a forward-looking slide. I will say that we are not starting as the PUC our efforts this year. I want to note that in prior years, we have accomplished such preparatory activities as what we called the natural gas fact-finding process, where we tried to bring in broader stakeholder community to an understanding of the gas utilities and the amount of sort of assets and infrastructure that they're working with, and started to explore big picture, the suite of strategies for decarbonization, and now in the context of the Climate Protection Program, although that wasn't finalized when we started that. We also have been preparing for implementation of HB 2021 by running a process to help stakeholders inform and utilities focus on the parts of HB 2021 that were particularly new and different from the planning processes that have come before. So again, some of the community benefits indicators, resiliency requirements, and to some degree, the emissions modeling as well. But where we are now is in that blue shape. is in review of kind of the initial plans, integrated resource plans, clean energy plans, and requests for proposals for resources that have been filed following the adoption of the CPP and HB 2021. We also have an open docket looking at some pretty significant legal and policy interpretation questions related to HB 2021. I can't talk about that, but I'll note that there are divergent opinions about how the PUC should interpret some pretty material parts of that law. And the other thing that we're doing right now that I wanted to highlight is really working on what I would characterize as external and enabling strategies. So in the category of enabling strategies, I would put things like reform of the PUC's interconnection rules, which are the mechanism by which mostly distributed energy resources connect to the utility system. So trying to modernize and reduce barriers for resources that are important to the emissions reductions and the small scale requirements. On the external side, I guess I'd say that utility IRPs, and is particularly true on the electric side, are showing us that issues like, that our goals, our requirements set forth in HB 2021 will be difficult to meet within those reliability and affordability parameters without some changes in the way the electric grid, the large regional electric grid works. Things that neither the state nor the utilities have total control over. And that includes things like regional transmission development to be able to access a diversity of cost-effective resources that are in different weather regimes throughout the region, and also markets that are able to help the lowest cost resource dispatch to bring down sort of the cost to consumers who are facing, frankly, lots of costs from this transition. So all of those are really important pieces from our point of view that we're working on to help these policies work. Upcoming for the PUC, we are working under integrated resource planning rules that were adopted in 2007, kind of at the beginning of that policy timeline that I showed you before. And I would expect in the 2024 to 2025 timeframe for us to really need to be modernizing those and to make them reflect new policies and to make the procurement that happens around the planning processes, work better in today's environment. The other thing that I wanted to note about what would be coming next year is I'll talk later about, the PUC will make its decision about whether the utilities are on the right track with the plans that are in front of us and that we're reviewing today. But utility planning is, apologies to utilities who are on here and might say it differently, but it is basically a constant process. So the second we make a decision on one plan, or maybe before we make a decision on one plan, the utilities are gearing up with their stakeholder roundtable processes to develop the next plan. And so, we really are sort of constantly building the plane while it's flying. And this is important that IRPs happen every 2 years because conditions change really fast. Renewable energy prices have changed a lot over the last 2 years. And, the trade-offs that utilities face change along with the industry and market environment that they exist within. And we have to keep looking at that in an iterative way. In the future, we'll have that next cycle of review, and eventually we'll also get to sort of figuring out our shared responsibility, with between the DEQ and PUC for sort of compliance determinations. And I'd say that just broadly across the two programs. But let's move to the next slide, where you can see a little bit more clearly where the engagement opportunities are. So on the left side, these are the PUC dockets that are currently going on. So we're reviewing Portland General, Pacific Corp's IRP and clean energy plans right now. We're also reviewing Avista and Cascade Natural Gas's integrated resource plans, and we just had Idaho Power's integrated resource plan filed. Again, they're not subject to HB 2021, but they have voluntary clean energy goals and are an important part of sort of the transmission conversation in our region. So another interesting example of utility planning for the electricity future there. The other two boxes here, the blue and the orange, are really meant to show the point that I was making before, that this is kind of a constant process. The electric utilities have various kinds of engagements that are not specifically housed within the PUC for people to learn about and influence the plans as they're in development. And the gas utilities also have sort of advisory committees as they're developing, the plans in this kind of repeated iterative way. Okay, let's go to this next slide. Wrapping up here, people. This is just kind of a more concrete, we had some questions about in front of the legislature about exactly when the commission would be making decisions on the various plans that are in front of us, and this just provides the dates that are currently scheduled. We do try to keep things a little flexible as issues come up and they need more time for vetting, but these are the dates that the PUC is currently scheduled to make a decision in our public meetings. As you see with the Northwest Natural IRP decision that we already made, our written order can end up following that public meeting decision by some period of time, just because of the complexity of not knowing what decision we're going to make and then having to write it up. Let's go to the last slide. I am not necessarily going to go in, I'm certainly not going to go through all of these, and I'm not necessarily going to go into any of them. But we really want to communicate that there are some significant trade-offs and complexities and uncertainties that are being discussed in these planning processes, and some of which can be resolved there, and some of which frankly can't in the with respect to the regional issues. Under pacing and flexibility, it would put things like sort of the questions of do utilities procure more of the resources, the clean resources that are commercially available today? How is that trade-off balanced against sort of creating near-term rate pressures and potentially missing out on opportunities to procure resources that haven't become commercialized yet in the future? None of these things are obvious. On the allocation of costs, risks, and benefits, we have lots of issues in front of us around energy burden and relative burden for paying for these policies. between different rate classes and sort of based on EJ factors. Lots of questions being raised about competition for sort of what types of resources and what business structures the clean resources of the future should come to the utility under. We also have lots of questions being raised about the role of voluntary actions taken by those that want to go further and faster. Are they really making a difference? Are they creating that additionality? How do we count that? Has that changed since we first started measuring additionality? All of these are valid and sort of unavoidable questions. We'll get through all of them, but the message is that it will take some time, and it will take the support of the broader community to get there. I don't have much more to say. I'm happy to answer questions. I hope that helped give people a sense of what we're up to.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. This is great, and it's great to have all this information in such a clear and consolidated fashion for folks to be able to reference, and because it is a complex process, as you mentioned. Certainly want to give Commissioner Sheeran and Mary Morelands an opportunity to weigh in if they want on any reflections they have about this. But one just maybe note for Commissioner Decker and Director Benner, about 2.5 years ago, I think we did a deeper dive on regional markets and transmission as two of the really key things that need to go well if we're going to meet our goals. And I just welcome you to both propose agenda items for future meetings where there might be some relevant updates and considerations, especially as we start thinking about developing our next biennial report. But anytime we can be a platform for kind of making sure those things are front of mind. And many of the other things, probably it would be helpful for us to have a better understanding of energy burden and equity and rate classes as well, and just how to think about that going forward. So just this has been really helpful. Commissioner, any feedback on that now, or otherwise I'll open it up to Commissioner Sheeran or Mary Morelands to.
I think you highlighted a couple of great ones, and we're always happy to, subject to resource availability, we're happy to come visit with the commission.
That's great. Commissioner Sheeran, do you want to add anything?
Well, first of all, want to appreciate Chair Decker's presentation. Certainly find it helpful to sort of see the work that we're doing in this broader context of, all the other plans and compliance mechanisms in play across the state that impact the energy sector. I think the point that I really want to underscore and really appreciated was when Chair Decker talked about sort of the iterative nature of this and how we no sooner sort of file one plan than we're, well underway of preparing the next, and just how dynamic this current environment is. I mean, it's always dynamic, and that's why RRPs have always been on sort of a 2-year cycle. But even with that, history, this particular period is more dynamic than most. And, the inclusion of the federal funding with the IRA is really potentially a game changer in a lot of ways, the ramifications of which I think we're all still trying to, wrap our arms around. And just maybe as one quick example to underscore this, and for folks who sort of have followed along with sort of PGE's, IRP, Clean Energy Plan process, but, we first filed back at the end of March, and then did a fairly significant update over the summer months to capture the fact that in that interim period from when we began the modeling, to when we filed, and then by summer, the combined effects of sort of load growth on our system, and some of which are being fueled by federal incentives, but not entirely, was significant enough and material enough that we had to file a significant update in terms of sort of what our long-term energy need will be, and how that plays into how the utility is thinking about the resources that are appropriate to both meet our load requirements reliably and affordably, but also hit those decarbonization targets. So, that's just one example of sort of many things that are like sort of constantly in play, and it will continue to be an iterative process. And ultimately, that even though, we'd love, I think all of us, my team in particular, who is, already thinking about sort of the next round of IRP modeling, with their eyes wide going, wow, I can't believe we're talking about this already. Well, we all might love sort of clarity, say, nope, this is the plan, and we've inked it, and let's go forward, and, we'll see you all in 10 years and see how it looks. The reality is that it's in the best interest of the system and the customer and our long-term, greenhouse gas reduction goals, that this be an iterative process and that we continuously update with all the new information and as the market continues to change and adapt. So patience and grace with all players involved as we all navigate this landscape. But hopefully we're all driving in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to add anything?
Absolutely, and thank you, Chair McDonald and Chair Decker. I want to echo the appreciation for the presentation. I both smiled and cringed to see all the policies on one slide together. It was a very effective tool, and I think a visual one I'm going to definitely use myself. So thank you for that. I did want to just say that iterative is the word of the day when we think about how we're learning in the process of utility planning. And really appreciate the awareness of the commission and just policymakers broadly as we work towards that really justice-focused future for utility planning and just utility delivery. So just wanted to express my appreciation and see a lot of things that were not surprising, but good phrasing, and we have a lot ahead of us as we work towards these shared goals. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Colin McConaughey, do you want to add anything, or perhaps we could ask you to do kind of a similar, how are things going on the implementation side for this CCP? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm double muted. Apologies again for that. I was just saying, Chair McDonald at DEQ would be happy to provide a presentation on our CPP implementation. And I think for today, all I really am prepared to say is just to actually express gratitude to Chair Decker and her staff. Our agencies work together in partnering in our respective regulatory spaces more so than we ever have in the past. And it has been very helpful for me and for my team to have that partnership at the Public Utility Commission. But again, happy to dive more deeply into the CPP and our implementation of that program with the Commission at a future date.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Commissioner Decker?
It looks like we do have a question in the chat for Chair Decker, if she'd like to take that.
I think we're doing okay on time, if you are willing to do that. Chair Decker?
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and I'll unmute Arlene if she wants to ask that question.
We could also hear the question during public comment if Commissioner Decker, you're able to stay on for that. I don't see Arlene coming off mute. So why don't we move
I'm
along?
happy to stay on at least until 3 o'clock.
Yeah, great. I think, well, yes, that'd be great. Thank you. Commissioner Decker.
And I think I'll just kind of close by thanking those that spoke up for their comments, and also to note that in addition to the sort of compliance interactions and other issues that we work on together with DEQ, our engagement with the Oregon Department of Energy becomes increasingly important. And you know, from our perspective, making sure some of the critical questions that are coming up in integrated resource plans are effectively treated in the kind of planning work that they're doing, you know, is important, and we're having, you know, good conversations there. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important role. Director Benner, anything you want to add in?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to echo the appreciation for Chair Decker joining us today and walking through this. I really appreciate the framing and especially the reminder that the mandates are not self-executing emissions reductions. And I think that's really important for this group, but also important for the Oregon Department of Energy as we advance our state energy strategy and look to leverage federal funding in support of all of these activities. And really appreciate the partnership of the PUC and DEQ and others as we look to how that federal funding can support the achievement of the really ambitious policies and programs that we have in place. So thanks for coming, Chair Decker.
Thank you, Director Benner. Well, let's go ahead and Abby, can you kind of let us know how many folks we think might want to provide public comment? And if you do want to provide public comment and you haven't let us know, please do so now so we can kind of manage our time.
I'm currently only seeing that one question from Arlene in the chat, and then I don't see any hands raised. So
Give it a couple minutes. I saw one other question about the relationship between biodiversity and the work that we're doing. So I'm not sure I know who that was posed toward. So if Artemio Paz wants to ask that question or put in some comments, happy to have you do that. And Abby, if you could kind of maybe work with Arlene to help her get off mute.
yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and unmute Arlene here on my end, and she should be able to go ahead and speak.
Arlene? Maybe it looks like you're still here, Arlene. We can always follow up with Arlene after the meeting and find out what her question was and forward that to you, Commissioner Decker.
Yeah, I just said the same thing in the chat, so we're thinking similarly.
Okay, that looks good. Arlene is appreciating that. And we're not seeing any additional hands raised relative to public comment. So with that, I can maybe move to next steps. And one correction I wanted to make is that I had mentioned that the Natural and Working Lands meeting with the relevant natural resource agencies was the 14th. I should have said the 16th, which is a Monday, not a Saturday, like the 14th is. So I just wanted to correct that for folks, especially in the agencies. And then we have also offered one-on-one meetings for any agency that can't make that meeting, or in follow-up to that meeting as appropriate, as interest allows. And then in terms of next steps, commissioners, you will be receiving a doodle poll later today for our next meeting, which, as Zach said, will be in November. And the majority of the meeting will focus on our natural and working lands work, including a discussion of some recommendations from our subcommittee that is of the commission, who is kind of reviewing the INR report this month, and considering how we should be using the work they did to inform next steps as it relates to how it would support implementation of the natural and working lands elements of House Bill 3409. So we have named a subcommittee, and we will be meeting in 2 weeks, and then developing recommendations, getting input from the agency staff, and any input we might get from the directors at the cabinet meeting, and then bringing those back to the commission. And we will do our best to get those posted early enough for public comment on that. And we'll certainly take the public comment we've already gotten into account for in our discussion moving forward. Zach, is there anything else you want to add for next steps?
Thanks, Chair McDonald. I just wanted to add 2 things. One was just that definitely wanting to keep the conversation going around the work plan, and part of why we wanted to respond as we're thinking of it at the same time is to continue that conversation. So if folks have continued thoughts, anything that was covered sparked thoughts, please feel free to reach out. And the last thing, I just wanted to thank Abby. This was her first time at the helm here for our Global Warming Commission meeting, and made everything run smooth. So thanks for that.
Oh, one last thing, and I think I sent this, although let me see. I dropped the link. Let me try this again. I dropped the link to the website that we used for the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee that has been meeting for the last year. That's where INR the Institute for Natural Resources, will post the report they submitted to us. We will post it on our next meeting web page when we get that up, and we'll do so in plenty of time for folks to be able to review that, and the link to the Oregon Global Warming Natural and Working Lands .org site. You'll be able to find the INR report there first. So wanted to just make sure everybody had that link. Anything else for the good of the order, commissioners? Well, with that, I would like to close the October 9th meeting of the Oregon Global Warming Commission. Thank you to all of our presenters and the commissioners and members of the public and agency staff that were able to join us today. Really looking forward to working with all of you as we move this important work forward. So thank you all, and we'll give you back 20 minutes of your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.